Nick pours like formaldehyde on it and just like burns it to death. We don't just have zombies walking around Horseshoe Bay during the day. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. We're doing it. We're doing the last season of Nancy Drew, season 4. 13 episodes, 45 minutes-ish per episode. Let's just get right into it. Of course, we have our main cast of characters, as seen in green, and we have our side characters, which is seen in pink. This is a complete side note, but for some reason, Google was just not my friend when I was trying to make this graphic. I could not find pictures or screenshots or anything from the show with the characters. So a ton of these side characters have like their headshots from like their acting and not from the show, because I couldn't find them in the context of their characters. So before we get in, I want to talk about kind of this season overall, and also I'm going to be doing this in a little bit of a different way than I have the other seasons, and you'll have to let me know down below whether you like this style. This season is very corny. This season is mostly focused on characters, which in and of itself is not the problem. I appreciate that it's the last season. There's a lot of character work that we need to feel satisfied with the series ending, but the acting, because it's so character focused, is so bad in this season. I don't know what it is, but there's some like really bad one-liners that are just so dumb, and they just cheapen the series, and it just feels very overacted, and it hasn't felt like that previously. It has like the same tone and everything as like a typical CW show, but something about this season just felt weird. But overall, like, I'm happy with this season. I think there was enough little plot lines and character work that I felt okay with the way that the season ended. I think for the beginning portion of this video, I'm going to talk about some of like the little storylines that happened with each of the characters that weren't massively important to the overall plot, but I think are relevant to like wrapping up the series, and they sort of play a part. Of course, we have our main character, Nancy. She has been moved over because there are a ton of people that I wanted to put on the board, but in the beginning of the season, Nancy still has her investigation company. She's like actually living there now instead of with Ryan and Carson, and she hasn't talked to Ace since they had their rejection and all of that at the end of the last season. She actually starts up a little bit of a thing with Tristan, who is a local fisherman. They meet through some happenstance. He supplies fish for the Claw and all of that, so they have flirty vibes. Throughout the season, Ace and Nancy are trying to find a way to be together. They try to do a bunch of different rituals that end up not coming to fruition, not end up doing anything. They end up performing this ritual with a doll. The doll breaks. They have to get another doll, and then that doll doesn't end up working, so they kind of scrap the idea of breaking the curse, and then they are forced to not be together anymore. Nancy wants to keep looking, but Ace doesn't really want to, just given how close Nancy came to dying. Ace is still working at the morgue. He has a couple of like little storylines here and there, but they're not super relevant. Bess is the director of the Historical Society now, but the Historical Society is losing funding, so there are a couple of events throughout the season of her trying to like raise money and stuff. She is still going strong with Addie. They're still in a relationship. And she also, during this season, starts teaching the teens in the town about the supernatural, which sparks some legal battles with a high-powered organization in the town called the Families for Truth and History. They basically want her to lock up all the supernatural documents and not allow public access. George is now pre-law. She is working with Carson to kind of learn the ropes of lawyering, and she also has a relationship with a kid in one of her like pre-med, pre-law courses. Completely unable to find a photo of him. Sorry, but he's very cute. Like their relationship, it's very sweet. Nick starts dating Jade, and is still, as far as we know, running his youth center, but there's like a whole storyline where he like tries to run for town council. He turns it down because the Families for Truth and History or whatever end up threatening him, and him and Bess go into like a whole effort to save the Historical Society and all of that together. Carson is still dating D.A. Rosario. They briefly have relationship issues in this season because he seems to not have handled his grief. But in the very next episode, she's pregnant and they're back together. So it's not a huge plot point. Ryan is now suddenly a relic hunter. All of his drama with the glasses from the previous season, the couple that he got the skinwalker hatchet from, there's a ton of drama there. They cause some issues for the gang, and so Ryan discovers that he's like actually a really good relic hunter, and he starts working with Bess and on his own to hunt relics. So anytime they need a relic in this season, they pretty much get it from Ryan, and he's kind of working with the glasses as well. In the beginning of the first episode, he sets up a meeting between the glasses, Jonas and Shelby, with Bess, because that was part of the deal. Like, they took his car in the last season, and to get it back, he has to set up a meeting with the keeper of the Historical Society. They offer to start selling unlisted relics on the black market for Bess, obviously with them having a percentage of the cut, and she disagrees. So they give Ryan his car back, they put a bombed talisman on it. Bess and Ryan get into a car crash, and that starts the whole Ryan becoming a relic hunter thing. But the most relevant part of that storyline is that he becomes a relic hunter, and he meets Red, who is another relic hunter. She fixes relics, and again, anytime a relic is damaged or that needs to be found, those two kind of are the go-to people, and you can assume, like, they say they need a relic, oh darn, they find it pretty much immediately. Do have a new police chief, who is Lovett. She's kind of like the obligatory replacement for all of the police chiefs that have come before. We have Callie, who is the spokesperson for the Families for History and Truth or whatever. Bree, who you can't see because Gotham is blocking, is a town council person who kind of thwarts Nick's efforts, and Nick and George's efforts later on, but she's going to have a whole storyline. And then we have Alice as well, who we will get to, and the Sin Eater, which I want to take a moment to appreciate this photo. It's so funny. And I love it so much. So, at the end of last season, Nancy got a call from an unknown person using a voice changer to tell her to go to the cemetery. She goes to the cemetery, and there's a bunch of dug up graves there. Doing some digging, the missing bodies don't have any relationship to each other, except they all died before the age of 30. Ace gets arrested for the body thefts because an arm was found in Ace's parents' backyard. Complaints have been made from the residents of the neighborhoods of barking dogs. So Nancy and Nick follow the dogs to the forest, where they see dead bodies rise up and walk away. They end up identifying the arm that was found in Ace's backyard as the most recently dead person, and she actually lived on a yacht alone. She comes from a really rich family, and the yacht was parked in the Horseshoe Bay's like yacht club park or whatever. Nancy thinks that the bodies are reburying themselves in the morning because, like, bodies aren't just walking around, you know? Like, we don't just have zombies. We don't just have zombies walking around Horseshoe Bay during the day. She breaks into the dead woman's yacht and finds a journal. The journal seems to have a map of old Horseshoe Bay. During this, she gets security called on her by a local yacht person, and she ends up hiding on Tristan's boat, and this is kind of where they officially meet. They figure out that the map of Horseshoe Bay is actually a series of greater maps of all of the different times that Horseshoe Bay's town lines and stuff have shifted, and it seems like all of the bodies are following the route of town that existed the time that they were alive. They can figure out where all of the bodies are meeting. They can go and, like, figure out what's going on. They track the bodies, they follow the bodies to the forest, and they find all of the bodies walking to this one place. They follow them into this clearing, and the bodies completely freeze. Lovett, the police chief, shows up, and while they're looking at the bodies, trying to figure out what's going on, the bodies unfreeze and start throwing up this weird, like, black sludge and collapse. This is also where Nancy finds out that that Tristan is the Glass's son. So the judge that George is clerking for, Judge Abbott, ends up having a heart attack. While he's having the heart attack, he has like these black veins going up his neck, and he's actively trying to destroy this one file. As he is passing out, he tells George, stay away from Magpie Lake. The file he was trying to destroy is about a break-in entering that was dismissed for lack of evidence. And while searching his office, Nancy gets some of the judge's water that George had poured for him previously in her mouth. She gets the black veins on her neck. She basically starts acting like a frat bro. Visits Logan, the guy from the breaking and entering case, and he tells them judge on the case was Judge Abbott, and he dismissed the case because he knew he came from a hardworking family and wasn't a serious criminal. But he tells them that Magpie Lake is the nickname for the girl's house that he broke into. That's the girl's name. And a week after the trial, she had an accident that landed her in critical condition. When they visit Magpie, aka Maggie, she says Logan was persistent in asking her out several times, but she said no. And the night of her accident, she was drinking and fell and hit her head. Nancy finds a figurine in Maggie's house that matches a thank you gift that Logan gave to Judge Abbott after his charges were dropped. They have Tristan steal a magical stomach pump from his parents to fix Nancy. Nancy ends up vomiting the same black sludge that the zombies vomited up, and Ace hacks the records of the head doctor that they sent Maggie's photos to after her accident, and it appears that the photos from the court case and the local hospital's medical records were actually edited, and she has more injuries than it originally looks like, and the head wound appears to have been from a blunt object, like the thank you gift, like that figurine. Seems like the judge was actually up for re-election when he let Logan off. Logan attacked Maggie and then came back to the judge to help him get off again. Ace and Nancy go and confront Logan, and George and Nick confront Judge Abbott. While they're confronting Logan, they switch his water with the poisoned water that seems to make people admit their sins. He admits that Judge Abbott changed the photo, and Judge Abbott claims that if George pulls the thread, everything will fall apart, leading them to believe that the town's water supply is probably poisoned. Episode 3 is not super important. This is the episode where Nancy and Ace try to get the doll that will hopefully break their death curse and then eventually end up calling off the search altogether. But during this episode, George and Nick are trying to convince the town council to shut off the town's water supply because they believe it's poisoned. The town council initially agrees to shut off the water, but eventually Bree ends up calling off the whole thing. At the end of the episode, she is in the tub and she makes a call to someone that says, I figured the water situation out, and then she has a heart attack and the black veins show up on her neck. Nancy hears a woman screaming around Icarus Hall, and she ends up interrupting a movie being filmed, and the producer of the movie ends up being Lacey, the podcaster from the previous season. Movie set is haunted. They spend this episode doing some digging into the history of the movie, and they find out that this is a remake of an old horror flick that took place in Horseshoe Bay. The previous director actually died. They believe that it was suicide. It was done in a bathtub, but it seems like there's some other stuff going on. Bree was responsible for the initial death of the director. She worked on the set. The whole crew was pretty heavily verbally abused by the director, and he would pull these horrible pranks, and one night they pull a prank and it ends up with him dying. Bree knew that he was dying. She watched him die and didn't do anything about it, so she used this black door to get rid of her sins, and it makes you forget your sins. So her father told her about this black door. She forgot her sins. Bree ends up resigning from the town council, and this is where Nick decides to go out for the position. So the group decides to go back out to the woods where they found those dead bodies, and they find a tooth in the woods. And the tooth seems to have occult symbols on them, and they appear to have been grown in instead of carved. They call in George's biological father, who is a dentist. They break into the local university's relic room, where they find skulls whose teeth have matching symbols. And it also, very conveniently, has a decoder that was unburied with the skulls that will reveal that which killed us. Unfortunately, the relic was stolen 3.5 years ago. Ace is, of course, able to track it down, and they hire a local relic hunter. Of course, that local relic hunter is Ryan. He is able to get the relic for them via Red, the hot woman who you could almost immediately assume is going to be Ryan's significant other. They use the artifact, and it releases some weird, like, dust/gas into Nancy's face, and it catches the paper with the symbols on fire. And after catching the symbols on fire, it reveals that the relic is actually a compass. They follow the compass to woods. They don't even try to identify the woods. The set looks exactly the same, so I don't know if the woods are different than where the bodies were found, but it's just some woods. And the compass stops moving when a weird humanoid being pops up and runs off. The humanoid being this lovely little reader right there. Ace, Nick, and Bess fake contaminate the water supply to get the water shut off by making it look like it's blood. Nancy and Tristan are doing a, like, school day fair situation, and they end up getting trapped and transported back to 1973. During this episode, okay, during these recaps, I tend not to talk about, like, relationships and stuff. That's kind of why I did it at the top of the video, but during this episode, Ace is, like, doing little tasks for Nancy. Like, she has been trying to solve this case of this missing ferret, and he, like, goes out of his way to try to find the ferret for her, and it's just, like, their relationship is so cute, and that's why the relationship with Tristan is very frustrating, because, like, you've obviously set up the endgame relationship, and later on, they try to possibly okey-doke us into believing that Tristan is endgame, and it just, like, During this episode, they fight off a giant spider, and all they do, it's like this giant mystical, magical spider that's like 80 feet tall, and Nick pours like formaldehyde on it and just like burns it to death and turns it to sludge. Nick is like a actual superhero in this season. He like fights off ghosts with swords, and he's like so good at fighting multiple things at once. It's hilarious. They decide to perform a seance to talk to Bree's father, find out more about the Black Door, and they end up getting sucked into playing this vintage board game where they have to get to the end of it. It's kind of like Chutes and Ladders a little bit, but like haunted and evil, and if you die, you die. But they end up getting the answer that they want. It leads them to the town hall. In the next episode, okay, so up until episode 7 or 8, I didn't really notice much. Like, I did feel like the season was a little bit goofy. Like, there's a lot of, like, filler episodes going on. They're not totally filler because they are, like, random crimes that have been committed around Horseshoe Bay, but ultimately, it's not super relevant. Like, the vintage board game thing is not super relevant, but in this episode, they end up getting body swapped. The acting in this is, like, very, very bad. The body swapping isn't really relevant. It's just, like, more angst about Nancy and Ace having to, like, be in each other's bodies and, like, having to work together because the Black Door is actually in the local yacht club basement, but the only person that has a membership to the yacht club is Nancy, and Ace is in Nancy's body, so like they have to work together all day to get in there. They do end up going into the basement. They find the door, and Nancy activates the Black Door by reading a poem on a mirror, and she takes some of the journals from the basement that have info on the supernatural creature that have been stealing people's crimes, and they identify it as the Sin Eater. They use an extractor that Nick built to isolate the mirror's first crime, because they find out if they can feed the first crime to the Sin Eater, then it'll kill the Sin Eater. But the mirror ends up showing them the founders of the Horseshoe Bay creating the Sin Eater. And the words they're chanting are during the whole ritual are also the founders' motto. Bess finds them a jar that can turn words into liquid. So they inject the Sin Eater with the poison words of the first sin. So they take the words of the first sin, put it in the bottle, it'll turn to liquid, and they inject the Sin Eater. Ace is being haunted by a dead body in the morgue. This starts a whole secondary love interest for Ace, which is also equally annoying in this one. Addie's parents reveal to Bess that the town founder's mural, where they found the motto, hides the actual truth of the town, which is that the founders kidnapped the local indigenous children in an attempt to bind the Sin Eater's soul with a human. In an attempt to get the children back, the majority of the local tribe were killed and the children were never found. They find a journal with all of the details of all of the victims. They had to bind the Sin Eater's soul with a person, and the Sin Eater was bound to one of the indigenous children. And then once the person that has the Soul Eater soul in them dies, they get reincarnated and it goes into another child. So basically, the Sin Eater is a person. Nancy's like already trying to kill the Sin Eater with like a poison arrow with a liquid on it. And so she shoots the Sin Eater with the poisoned arrow, and it drops a gift that Tristan had given her that they'd been passing back and forth as like a relationship thingy. And of course, it turns out that the Sin Eater is Tristan. Now, the arrow doesn't immediately kill him, but it does transform him back. And in order to cure the poison, they have to get the last sin that was eaten. Use a memory weave spell on Tristan to see him consuming his last soul. They don't really get much from the memory, but back in the present, he starts to say a bunch of random words that sends George and Carson on kind of an adventure together to track down what the words mean, and Tristan starts to relive his past lives. George and Carson end up tracking down the clues that were spewed to an adulterous land developer, and they're able to get his last sin, but it doesn't end up saving Tristan. When Nancy goes back into Tristan's memory, she finds the original Sin Eater, Nashua, and he says, we've walked this path many times before. He takes her to where the sins are being kept. Nancy releases it, and they're able to save Tristan. Tristan's mom, Shelby Glass, and Ryan track the IP address of someone who has a spy camera in the basement ritual where the Sin Eater and all of that is. And it takes them to this, like, spooky, dark, abandoned cabin in the woods. And Tristan's mom finds a photo and, like, sneaks it into her jacket and doesn't tell Ryan about it. Bess and Ace work together to find out what happened to the ghost that's communicating with Ace at the morgue. And this is where, like, the romantic feelings or whatever with Ace start happening. She reveals herself to him, and she's absolutely gorgeous. She's Alice. She is stunning. The Glasses have been trying to find a way to cure Tristan his entire life, and through Ace's help, they're finally able to translate the last of the writings on the cure. And it turns out the way to cure Tristan of the Sin Eater's soul is to sacrifice the last sinner. And the photo that Shelby took from that cabin was a photo of Nancy having the Sin Eater take a soul away. So they end up kidnapping Nancy. Nancy has no idea what she's done because, like, the Sin Eater takes away all memories, including the person that contacted the Sin Eater, and also the whole town. Like, the whole town forgets what sin was committed. So while she is kidnapped by the Glasses, she manages to convince Jonas. She manages to convince Jonas to let her use the relic, and in the midst of using it, Ryan ends up saving her, and they smash the relic, and she's not able to access the memory. For some reason, she believes it has to do with the fire that killed Alice. So she tries to commune with Alice under Ace's nose, and it doesn't really like end up working out well. Ace gets really mad at her and they have a fight. She finds out that the glasses actually put a magical relic into her back that would release a paralytic. They start a ritual to cure Tristan, but they end up getting interrupted performing the ritual by the group and Callie, who is the spokesperson for the Families for Truth and History, and it's also revealed that she is the controller of the Sin Eater. It's been passed down through generations of her family, is like charged with protecting the Sin Eater and making sure that the curse goes on. Ryan finds out that the owner of the cabin is Callie. Nancy notices the timestamp on the photo from Callie's cabin that the glasses took is timestamped directly after the phone call with Ace that she had previously, and Jane Doe's body was found the next morning. Nancy gets a call from the same guy who called about the missing bodies in the last season. They go to the graveyard, and it actually was the graveyard's grave digger. There's a fresh dug grave, presumably for Tristan, leading them to believe that Callie is going to kill Tristan to reincarnate his soul so that they can't cure the Sin Eater. Nancy and Ace ask Fisherman about the boat fire that killed Jane Doe. He says he's usually the only boat out on the water at night, so he was shocked to see someone else. He did see the fire, but he was never questioned, and he found that to be a little bit weird. Assuming that Callie is going to try to kill Tristan, the group redoubles their efforts to cure Tristan and decide to destroy the masthead that is that screams as a calling to the Sin Eater, and they find out that she's like a mystical mummy that the founders brought over to Horseshoe Bay to use in the ritual. When they try to destroy her, she shatters the mirror and dissolves. She's actually made of goddess essence, the same stuff from the relic that reveals Doray's sins. Nancy and Ace use the relic together. They go back to the night of Ace and his dad fishing, and Alice was actually their captive. When Ace dropped the curse jar in the ocean, I did mention it because it's really not super relevant, but basically they trap a curse in a jar. The boat catches fire and Ace's dad goes overboard. Ace basically had to choose between saving Alice from the fire and saving his dad, and he chose to save his dad. Ace called Nancy for help, and she uses the Sin Eater to erase all of their memories. Ace finds Jane Doe through their harbor records and goes to her apartment, and he helps her remember who she is. And when he tells her the truth of how she died, she passes on. And then, going into the last episode, the main conflict, Callie poisons the entire town with toxic sludge fog. Okay, I hope things don't look too different. My camera died. So, we're on the last episode. Episode 13. And the town is completely apocalyptic. This poisoned water made the whole town lose their minds. Everybody's stealing, physical violence going on. Very conveniently, none of the main characters really are affected by the bad poisoned water, but they should be able to harness the Soul Eater's soul, the Sin Eater's soul, to cure everyone. They make an antenna out of wood and some nails, I wish I was joking, to amplify his soul. When they try it, Nancy sees a vision of all of the previous lives that she lived, and it doesn't allow them to harness Tristan's soul. This leads them to believe that Tristan and Nancy's souls are actually connected, making them soulmates. Fuck off with this, okay? Like, the last episode, this is horseshit. They locate the place that Tristan and Nancy must have met in their previous lives to a locked parking garage, and she has a vision of her past selves. They find a crawl space underneath the parking garage, and they dig up a pair of scissors with her past life's name on it. She was the first Sin Eater's wife, Nashua. They believe she was his wife. They enter a memory weave together using the scissors as a compass, and Ace is their anchor. Bess is going to perform a magical soul-burning ritual that will separate their souls. Ace acts as their anchor because his soul is linked to Nancy's through the death curse. In the memory, the original Sin Eater, Nashua, kills the lead founder to keep them from hurting anyone else. Nancy finds out that she wasn't Tristan/Nashua's wife. She was actually the lead founder and the man who created the Sin Eater. Their souls are intertwined because she was killed by him. According to August, the lead founder's journals, he had already spread the Sin Eater ritual across the U.S. The ritual disconnects Tristan, and they're able to use the antenna to cure everyone. However, during the riots, the Historical Society gets burned down. Ace ends up having to pull Nancy out, and in the interim of the soul burning and all of that, both Ace and Nancy's souls were so badly damaged that they won't be able to reincarnate. So now we're getting into kind of like the wrapping up of where everybody is going to end and all of that. So Tristan ends up breaking up with Nancy, saying that she's in love with someone else, obviously, and leaves town. Ryan decides to leave town and travel with Red, the relic hunter. Carson and Rosario decide to keep the child. George goes to an out-of-state law school with her law school boyfriend. Nick takes a position with Nick Swift, building supernatural relics with Jade. Bess is going to be a relic hunter for the Historical Society, and Addie's going to become a town council member. Nancy is going to travel the U.S. to end all of the Sin Eaters, and Ace is going to go to college for pre-med. Ace has been doing research, and it seems like the death curse was burned off when their souls were damaged. They take a chance and kiss, and the glasses around them doesn't shatter like it has been every other time they've kissed, leading us to believe that the death curse is broken, and they will live happily ever after. And in the last scene of the series, the group makes a time capsule in the bar of the Claw and say goodbye because the Claw is being sold. That's how the series ended. That's the whole season. That's all of season 4. This is a super short video compared to all of the others because not a lot really happens with the plot in this season. Kind of like I said, this season focuses really, really heavily on the characters, which as a viewer is not a bad thing, but as a recapper, it kind of is. I say that like character development and relationships are something that make a show better, and they have to kind of be seen, not just told. It's really hard to like recap emotions and stuff. It's definitely the weakest season. I think it's very obvious that they were trying to wrap up a ton of loose ends because the show ended up getting canceled. I was only invested because of Ace and Nancy's relationship, and honestly, the ending for that, where they get their happily ever after, wasn't very satisfying. I'm okay with the way that the series ended, but I think it could have done for another season, or like this season being way stronger than it was. By the end of the series, the Nancy Drew mysteries were completely lost. As the series goes on, it gets more and more unrecognizable and gets less away from the fun of like solving a Nancy Drew mystery. It gets so unhinged and ridiculous as the series goes on. Like at the end of the series, we had Mad Max Horseshoe Bay that didn't affect any other town, and we had zombies. Which is just so far from the first season where we're just trying to solve the death of 2 women. It was fun to like watch these seasons and just see how unhinged it gets, especially as going in as someone knowing that I'm gonna have to recap it. Trying to like get all of the little intricate details is so much fun, in my opinion. So I had a ton of fun doing this little recap series. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. I definitely am planning on doing more of these videos in the future. I have recaps planned until the middle of next year. So I would love some feedback down below if you have watched all of this series, all of the episodes in this little playlist. I would love to know. If you enjoy the show, I would love to talk about it. If you have any other recaps that you would like to see from me, let me know. Mostly, thank you so much for watching if you've made it all the way to the end of this series. I'm sure it's a true mess, and I'm hoping that these videos will just get better and better. Don't forget to subscribe if you like more videos like this. I do vlogs, I do pop culture, I do reading vlogs, all of the fun stuff. All of my socials are also linked down below. I am most active on Instagram if you are interested in following me there. I would love to build a community over there as well. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you guys loved it, and I will see you in my next one.